What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
No, Kelly Clarkson!
There's no crying in baseball!
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Precious!
Are you gonna bark all day, little doggy? Or are you gonna bite?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give it.
Flick!
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4 of I Don't Give a Flick. I'm Johnny Blackburn.
And I'm Gary Elmore.
Welcome to the film podcast hosted by LeadFeather Productions, where the debates are as hot as a spicy meatball, and the knowledge is as memorable and as important as...
A loaf of bread.
You know what? In quarantine time, a loaf of bread is incredibly important.
As toilet paper.
As toilet paper.
Yes.
It's paramount at this point to have. Yeah. We're kind of coming to the end of that.
I think so. Yeah.
We're based out of Austin,
Coming
Texas.
out of
For
it.
those of you who aren't, and Governor Abbott decided to...
This is Radio Free Texas for all you people
out there
in prison in California.
where we've got businesses are allowed to have, or most businesses are allowed to have 25% capacity currently, and the ban on they've said that you don't have to wear a face mask anymore. I'm not sure.
Though some stores do still
enforce
that.
it.
Yeah.
Some still enforce it. I know the city of Austin is still gonna. Our mayor here, Mayor Steve Adler, has decided to enforce the stay-at-home ban until the end.
Well,
of the month.
that's we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
That's a different podcast.
Initially, it was till May 8th, if
Yeah.
memory serves me correct, and I think they're talking about extending. Anyways, you know what? Normally we have a lot of banter back and forth, but we have to get into this right away because this is going to be a long episode. So I was researching the other day on different episode topics that Gary and I could go about for this episode, and I came across a couple different videos and a couple different lists online for the greatest film actors and actresses of all time. While looking through the videos on the actresses, I thought to myself, yeah, okay, this is pretty accurate. You know, you see the Katharine Hepburn and you see the Meryl Streeps and, you know, and all those fantastic women. You see them leading the pack, and I didn't really have any problem with it. But with the actors, I just saw this disparity in era and in complete range. You know, I saw some lists where you'd see Clark Gable and Jimmy Stewart, Humphrey Bogart, Burt Lancaster in the top 10, and you see guys like Tom Hanks and Gary Oldman and Denzel Washington, Robert De Niro in the 20 to 30 range. And now, as much as we have to give credit and pay homage to the greats that have created film, I think there's a little disparity in that. Gary and I kind of discussed that earlier, where the acting in the golden era of Hollywood, if you recognize from episode 3 where we talked about the studio system collapse, the movies that a lot of the big blockbusters were being named for and the studios were going after were fairly safe. And, you know, they were pretty cautious about letting realism into films and talking about really diverse issues, you know.
Yeah. So, but I think where we're getting at is we decided to come up with our own list of
we did
greatest actors of all
time. And I think we're not, and in this list, mind you, we're not going to not pay homage to, you know, the greats, you know, the Humphrey Bogarts, the Jimmy Stewarts, the
Paul Munis,
the Friedrich Mulches. What's that guy's name again? One guy that Gary and I had never heard of, or it's two guys.
Friedrich March.
Friedrich March, who was a star in the 30s. So mine and Gary's film range is probably about 1940 or so to present day.
Yeah, so
we're pretty solid on anything before that. Outside of Charlie Chaplin, we're a little rusty.
So Johnny and I decided to come up with a scientific infallible method of determining who the best actors of all time was.
It's a pretty solid algorithm formula that we've got going on here.
And we'll do another episode for best actresses.
We will. And
I think I also want to do an episode on best composers too. So
so John Williams and the rest of the pack. Okay.
Yeah. Spoiler alert: John Williams is going to be number 1.
Regardless.
So we came up with I think some pretty good criteria here.
And how is our list formulated, Gary?
All right, so we first said, okay, We've got 5 different categories that we weigh the actors on. The first category is Academy Award wins for Best Actor or Best Supporting Actor. And we decided to weigh that at 10 points. The second category is Academy Award nominations for Best Actor or Best Supporting Actor. And we weighed that at 5 points. And then we got into memorable roles, which are the roles that really were iconic. They had movies that really touched us and really made us think and stuck with us our whole lives. We weighted that at 2 points because we recognize that's a pretty subjective term.
True. And, I think for, Gary and I are both children of the 90s and the 2000s, primarily, and the 2010s. So,
well, we were full adults in the team.
Yes. I think a lot of, like we said, and when this is over, we want you to comment below. We want you guys to comment below the actual podcast line itself and let us know what you think, what your arguments would be, because this list is going to be different. So basically, it's going to. Go ahead and finish the list.
Just make sure you smash that like button. Smash that like button. 3, 2, 1. Like smash.
Smash attack! Snap into a Slim Jim.
So we weighted memorable roles at 2, and then genre range, which is we broke it into 4 categories: drama, comedy, action, and horror. So the more range an actor had on what types of movies he was in, they got 1 point for each of those. And finally, we had character range, which was an overall rating of, and the most subjective one, of how we thought the actor could act in various given roles, be it like a strong, angry guy or like a weak,
timid, docile
guy,
figure. Yeah.
And that we weighted at 8 points because it's acting. So we wanted to try and get that weighted pretty heavily.
Yeah, exactly.
So we threw all the numbers into our magical machine of science, also known as a Google Sheet, and it spit out the undeniable official top 10 rankings.
And it's so
actors.
official. It's so official that Gary and I are going to take this list and basically dissect it, and we're going to cross it off and come up with our own agreed upon, where we'll have to make sacrifices and debate it. Our own greatest top 10 actors of all time. So we'll basically go through the list of the people we actually that we actually went through and named, and we'll pick the best 10. So even the scoring system we currently have is not our final list.
Right. So I think, as with any top 10 list, we should start at the bottom and work our way up. What do you think?
I think that's a fantastic idea, Gary.
All righty. So the number 10 best actor of all time with 127 total points is
Drumroll.
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman! The man from The Replacements and Mississippi is Burning.
And also from Superman, Lex Luthor. Yes, Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman has been an actor for decades. The first movie chronologically that I can think of him in is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where he was very, very young.
He was young in that.
All the way up into the 2010s, So he's had a very long career. He's been in movies like The French Connection, Superman, Quick and the Dead. He's been in a lot of films.
We've got such a long list with everybody on here. Let's just
we'll just cut it down.
Let's just name it. We don't have to go through a profile of everybody yet.
So
number 9.
Number 9 is Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington
with 128 points, just eking it out over Gene.
That's right.
Number 8 is Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando. He'll give us enough if we can't refuse. It's a great impersonation.
Yes, it is. Number 7 is Robin Williams.
With 135 points.
With 135 points, yes. At 139 points is Robert De Niro.
Coming in
number
at
6.
Number 6, the big 6. 6. Next to be 66. The big 06. There you go.
Breaking into our top 5, we have the actor Tom Hanks at 145 points.
Oh, wow. I don't think I've ever heard of him.
Yeah, he's fairly new.
Okay. All right, good.
Just above him at 146 points at number 4 is Dustin Hoffman.
Ooh.
Hook himself, yes. Number 3, top 3, is Daniel Day-Lewis at 148 points. Number 2 is Laurence Olivier. Yes, Lord Lawrence Kerr Olivier with 151 points. And the number 1 actor
Of all time.
with a total point score of 175 points is Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson. Here's Johnny.
Yes, Jack Nicholson clearly is the greatest actor of all time, far and away exceeding everyone else.
According to our list. Once again, all subjective. Feel free to argue. So what Gary and I did is...
Oh, I think that's the whole podcast. I mean, like, we told him the list.
Yeah, there we
so
go. We're all done. Have a good week, guys.
See you guys later.
Totally kidding. Go down the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and let you know, going down 11 and below, Gary and I, we went on a couple sites, and IMDb in particular, and did their 100 Best Actors. We saw all the nominations and what they rated it, and, you know, our arguments for that. Just outside the top 10, we won't go through the 11th, Leonardo DiCaprio, 12th, Christian Bale, 13th, Sean Penn, 14th, Al Pacino, 15th, Paul Newman, 16th, Spencer Tracy, 17th, Gary Oldman, 18th, Jack Lemmon, 19th, Jimmy Stewart, and 20th, Anthony Hopkins. The remaining list was Joaquin Phoenix, Jeff Bridges, Morgan Freeman, Kevin Spacey, Robert Duvall, Friedrich March,
Yes,
actor
finally
from the
got down to
30s,
him.
Peter O'Toole, Gary Cooper, Humphrey Bogart,
And the indefatigable, the greatest, John Goodman.
oh my God. All right. I just want to be clear. The only reason that John Goodman was on there, only reason John Goodman is here, is because Gary has a huge man crush on him. And I agree, he's a very talented actor, but not in any way, shape, or form one of the top 25, 30 best actors of all time.
The data bear it out. I
No,
don't know what
because
to tell you.
I'm going to scroll down here. Everyone else below John Goodman, we just didn't score at all. I mean, there's still we didn't do Michael Caine, Richard Burton.
Who's ever heard of Ben Kingsley or Alec Guinness? What is his name?
Alec Guinness,
Yeah,
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Burt Lancaster. I mean, Clark Gable, Sidney
Charles
Poitier.
Boyer.
John
Okay.
Wayne was on there. We had a bunch. So basically what Gary and I are going to do is we're going to take the current list we have, including people outside of that top 10, and we're going to come up with our own agreed upon top 10 in general. So let's start another list up here really quick. Okay, just a list of top 10. Okay, and we're going to go through until Gary and I can agree the 10 greatest actors of all time. Now, mind you, we have less actors that were primarily that were fairly popular in the the 40s, 50s, and 60s because of that studio system. Because the studios, they really had a stranglehold on the type of scripts that were coming in, and we didn't really start to see that diversity in the type of roles that actors were allowed to play until the 60s came around. So these other actors, while still fantastic, will probably
Be lower.
or left out of our top 10 completely
Right.
for the most part, unfortunately. So obviously there's plenty of arguments to go for both ways, but that is how we're doing it today.
Doing it live, folks.
So let's do both lists so we can see
All right.
who we got here.
Okay. Whoop.
And I'm thinking that I'm going to go ahead and let's take this list. You're going to have to edit this part out.
Okay.
We can't have this much radio
fine.
silence.
Okay.
Okay.
So what are you thinking, Johnny?
Okay. So what we're also going to add in here is I may throw a couple names into the ring that potentially could be on this list within the next 20 to 30 years because their careers are so young, and I see the potential that they have, and I may throw that in there, So from the current list that we've got, okay, current list right here, going down to the very bottom.
The very bottom.
Well, not you don't have to do guys we didn't score. So starting with John Goodman and working up.
Okay.
We need to decide out of this list who we're going to actually take out. So we're going to start with John Goodman. We're going to start with Gary's favorite, Gary Elmore. Do you think John Goodman should be in our top 10 list?
You know, I think that John Goodman has so many wonderful roles and so many wonderful qualities to him.
Okay, like what? What wonderful roles does he have? What are his most memorable
King
moments?
Ralph, you know, and you know, then he's also got like Cloverfield Lane or Drive, whatever it was
10
called.
Cloverfield Lane,
Yeah.
and Big Lebowski,
Yeah,
you know,
and John Goodman, like,
Monsters Inc. all
yeah,
of them.
he's a comedic person in a lot of ways. I mean, the first thing, you know, I thought of him from was like Roseanne,
Sure.
from the 80s. And like comedic actors, I think really are able to manipulate, or rather express their emotions to move you from happy to sad, because they lower your guard so well. So,
All right.
you know, I don't know if I'd put him on my top 10 though, but I do like him.
I couldn't see him in my top 10, man, primarily because, yeah, the roles he's been offered have not been that of... And you don't necessarily have to be a leading man
Right.
in every movie you're
Right.
in to be on my top 10 list. I mean, we've got up there pretty high. Gary Oldman's up there. He has been primarily a supporting actor for the majority of his career. You know, you see guys like... Gene Hackman even really hasn't been a leading man in the last 20 to 30 years.
Anthony Hopkins, very rarely.
Very rarely, you know, outside of Silence of the Lambs.
And even then he was supporting. Yeah.
Technically, he was. Yeah. What
Yeah.
was his screen time was like less than 20 minutes.
Yeah, it was like 19 minutes or something.
Something like that. So you know, with John Goodman, I think that he plays a very large, bellowing figure. He uses his physicality to his advantage, and it works.
Yeah.
Audiences love him, but I feel that his range of acting is very limited in not the genres that he can perform, but the types of characters that he can. So I would have to take him off. So,
Okay.
and if you're taking him off your top 10, let's just put a big mark through him.
All right. Big old mark. through
Big
it.
old cross off mark there.
All right. So John Goodman's not on our list. Womp
Okay,
womp.
womp womp. Humphrey Bogart, moving on up.
Okay. Humphrey Bogart.
This is a prime example of the golden era of Hollywood.
Yes.
You know,
the silver screen.
Yeah, the silver screen, baby. And this is the one. Humphrey Bogart was the one actor that was consistently coming up on a lot of the articles that were written by people that were fans of the era from, you know, the 20s to the 60s, or 20s to the 50s, really. Not that we're necessarily older in age, but people that were big fans of those movies.
Right.
And
Because I mean, when you think about a movie from the 40s, you think about a Humphrey Bogart movie, and I don't know any other actor that can claim to own a decade like Humphrey Bogart could the 1940s.
you know, I would still with guy, yeah, his peers from that era being the
Except
Clark
John
Gables,
Goodman, of course.
God damn it. The Jimmy Stewarts, the Friedrich Marches.
Yes,
Kidding
love
on
me
that
some
one.
Friedrich March.
You know, the Spencer Tracy's. You know, Humphrey Bogart was, for a time, even though he, you know, wasn't the most charismatic guy, he was definitely the Frank Sinatra of Hollywood due to how popular he was.
Yeah.
And you also have to remember, it's kind of like a Leonardo DiCaprio effect. You know, DiCaprio defined his generation of acting. Although I think DiCaprio honestly is a better overall versatile actor than Bogart was. And I'm going to get a lot of criticism from a lot of people from that, but I do. I'm staunch on that opinion. But he had
Yes,
a lot
he
of
is.
roles written. He had a lot of, not only great roles written, he was in a lot of famous movies that were fantastic because of the story and because of co-stars. Not saying that Humphrey Bogart was not one of... He's a cherished treasure in American cinema history and just as a public figure in general.
Right.
But I just, you know, I've seen... Casablanca is one of my favorite movies, and I know it's your favorite
Yeah.
movie.
Yes. Along with Spider-Man
Next
2.
to Spider-Man 2, of course.
Yeah.
We'll get into that one in another podcast. Not enough time today. But between that and The African Queen and The Maltese Falcon and...
Yeah, just
you
the
know,
noir genre was...
belonged to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And maybe it's just me not finding a lot of those movies to be the best that are on the block, you know, not the most diverse. Like Casablanca's one of my favorites, but African Queen and Maltese Falcon, I've seen both of them, and they're good. I'd watch them again, but I'm not going to put those in my top 30
Yeah,
kind of
and
thing, top 50.
it's tough because one of the things, to digress, Johnny and I were talking about how the art and science of film has evolved
So
over the
much.
last 100 years.
So much.
So it's really hard. It's like comparing athletes today to athletes that played football in 1920. Because in 2020 there are no athletes, and in 1920 there were. True. Yeah, because we have COVID, so there's nobody doing anything.
Absolutely.
But you got completely different equipment. You got completely different rules. It's hard to compare.
Those rules, that's a really good way to put it. The rules of how you can act and what you can say and the level of emotion you're allowed to put into a character is so different from how it was 70
Right.
years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of a strike for us against Bogart, was that he wasn't allowed to put a ton of emotion into his roles. He was a fairly stoic and put together individual. He'd be one of those guys that I would put on a top 10 outside looking in, but I honestly wouldn't even consider putting him in top 10 just based off pure acting ability. If we're talking about icon status and we're talking about what he brought to the era and owning all of it, for sure.
And
absolutely.
It's hard to break up between like what's icon status and what is actually
What's straight up
actor
talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's hard because it's movies are an art, so they appeal to your emotions. So it's hard to break those away and be completely subjective.
Absolutely. So what are we saying on Humphrey Bogart? Are you feeling like you could make an argument for him for top 10?
I'm going to say no on that one.
Okay. All right. One more off the list.
Boom.
All right, we're going to keep rolling along while Gary's typing. A lot to get through. Gary Cooper, for those of you that aren't super familiar with Gary Cooper, he was almost like Humphrey Bogart, he was a gigantic action Western, primarily, movie star back in the 40s and the 50s. A lot of great memorable roles.
Yeah, a lot of Westerns.
Yeah, a lot of Westerns. If you'd ever heard of High Noon, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, The Pride of the Yankees, those films in particular, I'm not even super familiar with all of them. I've seen them probably all once.
Yeah.
But I remember with Gary Cooper, he was very much like a John Wayne character where, even though just not quite John Wayne, he had a little bit more diversity in the roles he was able to play, or maybe the roles he was allowed to play. Maybe because John Wayne back then, they stereotyped you in a particular role if you were really good at it, and it was very difficult to move. It was very difficult to move from one axis to the other.
They didn't have small independent production companies like Blumhouse you could go to and be like, hey. I'm Bruce Willis, and I want to play a completely different person today.
Exactly, and I just feel like it because my name is popular, and I don't have a contract with my overlords.
Yeah. So back then you had to play what the movie studios put you out.
Exactly, and Gary Cooper throughout his career, just from what we've seen, I'm not really swayed in any direction.
Yeah, I couldn't go with Gary Cooper either, even though he's got a great name.
Yeah,
his first name.
All right, Gary Cooper off the list.
Okay.
Peter O'Toole.
Peter O'Toole.
This. See, it's getting a little harder now. Gary, you one of your favorite movies.
Yeah, I was shocked to learn that Peter O'Toole had never won an Oscar.
No? How many nominations?
He had 8 nominations for Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor.
And talk about a guy that was able to keep his career going.
Yes.
I mean, for 50 years at this point. I mean, I'm talking we're talking from the late 50s all the way up until, most notably Troy where he was Priam. For those of you that saw the Brad Pitt and Eric Bana one, just star-studded cast. But
yeah, he was an actor for many years. A lot of my favorite movies have him in it. Man of La Mancha is one of them.
Lion in Winter.
Lion in Winter. He did an excellent job alongside Katharine Hepburn in that one. So I will definitely be putting Peter O'Toole on my list of top 10 actors.
Whew. We're not even going to make an argument. You're just going to throw him in there.
No, he's up there.
Highlight him on there so we know he's still alive.
All right.
You don't need to start your list yet.
Okay.
But you can if you want. It's up to you.
All right.
All right. I'll let Gary take the Peter O'Toole one because I'm kind of, just on the fence with him. I'm like, yeah, whatever. He was great. But the next guy, this man needs no introduction. But like I always say for Gary, he's a man that insists on having one anyways. Ladies and gentlemen, Friedrich March.
March Madness.
That's where it came from.
Yeah, is that where it came from?
Yeah,
I want
all
everyone-
of his fans would
not
always
where it
like
came from.
crowd inside the theaters to see his movies, and they would call it March Madness.
Here's the thing. Friedrich March is not someone Gary and I were super familiar with outside of seeing him in the initial A Star Is Born, and you said you had seen him in Inherit the Wind.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
he was one of the leads in that. We didn't know a ton about him.
No, not really. Not at all.
He was a very popular actor back in the 30s and the 40s in particular. Had a lot of Oscar noms and wins. That's how we found him.
He had 2 wins and 5 nominations.
That's pretty good. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, the competition back then was a little. The pool was smaller to pull from.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it was definitely something where, you're always fighting. Just to be nominated is an honor in its own. And I think just to say this as a side note, I know a lot of people nowadays they give the Oscars a hard time because they're just picking movies or they're picking actors and actresses that are long overdue because they've been in the business for a long time. Or they're picking a movie that's had
a great party for the people that picked the Oscars.
Yeah, exactly. Like there was a lot
Harvey
of
Weinstein.
Yeah, there was. Hey, all right. Too soon. La La Land and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I felt were 2 of those kind of films. Good movies all around. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood were a little out the door on, but in general, they were picked because they depicted the golden era of Hollywood, and there was star-studded casts, and it showed one of them showed actors who had been in the game for a long time that really needed the nominations, and the other one it showed a solid performance by Emma Stone in her trifecta: dancing, singing, acting, and then a failed attempt, in my opinion, on Ryan Gosling's part. But hey, that's just me. Someone who majored in music theater and did it for a very long time.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
Although it did win the Academy Award for, I think, 35 Seconds.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Until Warren Beatty realized he made a mistake.
Yeah. Poor Warren Beatty.
Anyways, I guess the point of saying that is the one thing that the Academy typically will always get right is the majority of the pool for the nominees for Best Leading Actress, Leading Actor, and Supporting Actress and Supporting Actor. A lot of times you will have picks in there for people that may not have been the best one of the top 5 best of the year, and they've just been long overdue. But for the most part, they pick, regardless of age, regardless of how long you've been there, they pick the people that have done the best job, put in the most work, and were convincing enough.
Yeah, because Johnny and I were looking through the list because the Best Picture nominations, a lot of them are like, why is this nominated? This is a crappy movie.
Depending on the year, yeah.
Yeah, depending on the year. But for the Best Actor nominations, everyone that's on that list put up usually a pretty solid performance whenever they were nominated.
Typically. Anyway, so we took that into consideration with Friedrich March, but in the few movies we've seen of his,
no,
not nothing to write home about. Sorry there, Friedrich. I'm sure if your family's listening, they won't be happy that I said that, but it is the truth.
Yes.
So moving on up, who we got, Gary?
We have Robert Duvall.
Robert the Do-Man Duvall.
Yes, another actor who's had a very long career. He's had 1 Academy Award win and 7 nominations.
7 nominations.
Yes.
Man. Robert Duvall has been one of my favorite consistent anchors, if you will, in every film that I've ever seen him in. He's always the guy that anchors the rest of the crew. You never see him display too much emotion, but you never see him not display not enough.
It's just it's like the Goldilocks.
It's really
he's Goldilocks.
He's Goldilocks, everybody.
Okay.
He's between the 3 bears. He's just right. I've never been blown away by Robert Duvall performance, but at the same time, I've never hated him in anything that I've seen. And he's
like meatloaf, It's like it's not going to be like the greatest food you ever had, but you're going to like it.
It is.
I mean,
I feel like in every movie, even in a movie where, even in a movie like The Godfather, where you have a lot of extremes, you have the hothead with James Caan, and you have the up-and-coming rising star in Al Pacino, and then you have the
Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando as the head of the family, the really Italian. That's that's another guy who's an iconic character actor. But then you have Duvall, who's just the average guy who started out doing law, and he ended up getting in with the family, and he just kind of keeps them anchored.
Yeah,
he keeps everything together.
consigliere.
Yeah, the consigliere. He's the glue. And for that, we commend Robert Duvall.
Right.
But I could never see putting him in my top 10. He's never moved me to the point of tears, never made me laugh so hard that my stomach felt like it was going to burst, or laugh so hard that I farted. That is part of my criteria.
That is
multiple
heavily
actors
weighted.
on here have made me laugh so hard that I have farted before.
And that's not hard to do.
It's true. It's not hard to do. And if he's never done it, then what does that say about his comedic acting chops?
Not great.
No. Love Robert Duvall, but I don't know. What about you? How's it feeling?
Yeah, I wouldn't put Robert Duvall on my top 10 list either. I do enjoy the movies he's in, but I wouldn't say that he's exceptionally great.
True. True.
Overall for his career.
Absolutely. Moving up.
All right, our next actor is Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey, I was talking to Johnny, and he's like the Joe Montana of Academy Awards. He was nominated for 2 and won 2.
For those of you that don't know, Joe Montana went to 4 Super Bowls and won all 4.
Take that, Tom Brady.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Hell yeah. He could also be like the Troy Aikman of Hollywood. Aikman went to 3 Super Bowls and won 3.
Right, and that was
So did Emmett
all
Emmett
Aikman's
Smith.
talent. It wasn't the Dallas Cowboys offensive line. You see, football is about offense, defense, and special teams.
Thank you, Jason Garrett and John Madden.
Yeah, no problem.
And Gary Elmore, who knows little to nothing about
Yes.
football.
Should I tell my potato joke?
We don't have time. We'll have a full episode designated to your potato joke, I swear to God, sometime in the
Subscribe for potato joke.
future. It'll pop up in the corner,
Yeah.
we promise. You're
Yeah.
going to have to do that graphic, by the way.
Go to our Patreon at www.potatojoke.com.
Kevin Spacey, this is a podcast about the talent and the dedication that these gentlemen have had to their acting careers. So all legal issues aside,
Kevin Spacey is a fantastic actor.
as far as acting goes, Kevin
Yeah.
Spacey is a fantastic actor. And I'm just taking House of Cards. At least the first 2 seasons are 2 of the most, I think, dynamite and dynamic episodes in dramatic television history, next to Breaking Bad.
Yeah,
That's just me.
The first episode of season 2, I remember watching it and being like, oh, they took out the parts where he does his soliloquies to the camera. And I was really sad. And then at the very end of that episode, he turns to the camera and he's like, I bet you thought I forgot about you.
Love Frank Underwood.
Yeah, and then at the end, it's been like 6 years, spoiler alert. At the end of season 2, when he becomes president and he just raps on the Resolute desk with his ring. Oh, what a great ending.
Yeah, it did send chills on my spine for sure. Kevin Spacey, for those of you that are fairly, his heyday really for acting was really the 90s, early 2000s, turn of the century kind of thing. American Beauty still to this day is one of my favorite films. Just Sam Mendes did a fantastic job with the overall creation of that. I mean, it was a masterpiece as far as it's in my top. I'd say it's in my top 15 for easiest. And I got a long list. And then The Usual Suspects. He just finds a way to draw you into him and trick you at the same time, because you were talking about Usual Suspects earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he throughout the whole movie. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen Usual Suspects, but they're looking for like this criminal boss, and they've got a group of people that they're wondering, these detectives, who the criminal is, and it turns out to be the least likely person at the end, which is Kevin Spacey.
Yeah. And, with Kevin Spacey, though, unfortunately, he has a very small body of tremendous work. I think the movies and the roles that he's taken over the course of and he's a very famous actor, but outside of House of Cards and outside of a few Hollywood flicks that he's done, between those 2, Outbreak, there's obviously other ones. K-Pax not being one of them.
Nor Superman Returns.
Yeah. It's one of those things where he kind of just, I don't know if he sold out or they just weren't offering him a lot of roles. That I don't know the facts on that, but he got famous for playing in a lot of just mediocre films that may have still been entertaining, but they didn't really speak to the true vibrato of what an actor is and the craft, and I think that really hurts him. So that would take him off my top 10, unfortunately. But he'd be on the outside looking in. Once again.
And I will say that I think my favorite role of Kevin Spacey's is the current role he's playing, which is Crazy Kevin Spacey. If y'all have time, you can YouTube Kevin Spacey's 2019 Christmas Threat-a-thon. which
I haven't even heard of this. I'll check it out when we're done.
But yes, I would not put Kevin Spacey on my top 10 list, though he's very enjoyable to watch.
All right. Moving on from that, we've got our good friend Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman, the voice.
Voice. If our lives were narrated by Morgan Freeman, then
We could never sleep.
we could never sleep. It's true. He'd always be talking.
Yeah.
He's dreaming. I can't even do a Morgan Freeman impression.
No, I can't even.
Yeah.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman has a great voice. Won 1 Academy Award and nominated for 5. He's a very, rock solid kind of, character, and he does really well as playing as the foil to a more eccentric person. So you think probably his most iconic role would be The Shawshank Redemption. He's sort of, Red. He's the guy that's been there forever. He knows everything. He keeps everybody working.
You would think that would be his most iconic role, but I guarantee you, if you talk to people, if you talk to a lot of millennials and what's the generation below us?
Generation Z.
If you talk to a lot of them would probably say God from Bruce Almighty.
Okay.
Not proudly. I mean, I think Shawshank Redemption and $1 Million Baby are probably his 2 most iconic roles in my memory. But.
Yeah. Well, I don't talk to those people, so
okay.
I don't need
very good. Then.
I don't
I
need
guess
to
it's
worry
just me.
about that.
Okay. The thing with Morgan Freeman is he's one of those guys that always he pulls you in, and I feel like it's kind of the same thing with Kevin Spacey, where except his total work, like his total pool of work with it being tremendous, is much larger than what Kevin Spacey's is. But I feel that he's been in so many movies over the last couple years, or the last 1 or 2 decades, that I think it's just not necessarily tainted his image as one of the greatest to ever live, but at the same time, like he hasn't really stretched himself as much. Like, I mean, when I think back to like his early works and where he was fantastic, where my jaw dropped, I thought of Glory, I thought of Unforgiven,
Driving Miss Daisy,
and honestly, even to a lesser extent, I really like Along Came a Spider.
Yeah,
I've always, it's been one of my favorite detective thrillers, for the longest time. Seven, just so many iconic roles back in the 90s and in the early to mid 2000s. But since then, he's been in a fair amount of good movies. But I don't know. I felt like he never took the next step to diversifying himself even more to the point of where he could contend with the Titans. I think he's one of those, like, he's in your top 30 kind of thing, and that's about as far as he flies.
Yeah, if even then. I mean, Morgan Freeman just never expanded or challenged himself enough, I don't think.
As much as he did in his earlier years.
Yeah, in the 90s, definitely he was trying new things, and that was exciting. And it may just be that he kind of got too late a start doing movies to really get into that.
And maybe
I don't really remember him in anything before.
The 80s, yeah. He may have been typecasted, too. That's something that we could dedicate another podcast to. But yeah, so outside looking in, both of us? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Next actor is Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bridges, man.
Tron himself.
I'm the dude. No, man. I'm the dude. You're on your element, Donnie. Well, that's John Goodman.
Yeah. Who did not make the list, apparently.
No,
Johnny.
Gary, he did not make the list. Look, Jeff Bridges, once again, I love everybody on this list. I mean, my favorite, obviously, is Friedrich March. But
clearly.
But Jeff Bridges, he plays a perfect Southern country boy, whether it's a police officer or it's in Crazy Heart, where he was a fantastic job as an alcoholic, fallen on bad luck, out of his prime country singer, country musician.
Or the CEO of a major multinational arms dealing company as an Iron Man.
It's true, as an Iron Man, I think that it's the same thing. It's, his pool and his performances together, it's not enough to rock my boat for a top 10 introduction. As much as I love him, I mean, The Big Lebowski that's easily in my top 5 for favorite comedies of all time.
It's an extremely good movie. But I wouldn't say that he's an enjoyable actor, but I wouldn't say that you'd base a craft on him.
No, that's a very good way to put it. You would not base a craft on him. Yeah. So moving on. So I have to preface this by saying, this guy not only has he already had a stellar career, but he's only in his mid-40s at this point, and he's just getting stronger. Joaquin Phoenix is right above, and I'm going to immediately say that Joaquin Phoenix is... I'm going to make a big argument for him in my top 10, and I'm going to tell you why. I know that he hasn't... I understand that he hasn't had the longevity and the career quite like a lot of the other guys on this list. You know, his career really has only spanned the last... Big times only spanned the last 20 years about, you know, maybe 25, maybe. You know? But the few performances that he's had that have been memorable are plentiful. I mean, I can tell it's him acting, and I can hear his voice, but the cadence and how he talks between each character, I think, might be one of the strongest in history. Honestly, I mean, between Gladiator, between Joker, between even Johnny Cash and Walk the Line. Yeah, you know, even
Signs,
even so much as Signs, even something so as small as Signs, you just don't see him playing the same part very often. You know, and I don't know if he's just, like you said earlier, legitimately nuts, or he's just a really talented actor who's dedicated to his craft. My bet is it's a little of both. I know his family. You know, they've been
his family.
I've read that his family, you know, that they were all they were just all hippies, and they've been like vegans since they were kids. For those of you that are familiar, his brother River Phoenix was a very famous and up and coming actor who did Stand By Me and
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Was he in that?
Yeah, he was young Indiana Jones at the start of it.
Oh, that's right. Yep. God, I haven't seen Last Crusade in a while. I just always think of Sean Connery.
That's the only thing I think of.
Whenever I think of that.
We'll see if he thinks about him when we get to him on the list. So
yeah, maybe. So that's what I'm going to say my piece on Wiki. I want to take up all the time.
But. Joaquin Phoenix, I think he's great. I give a lot of points to actors that really transform themselves either through prosthetics or physically actually gain 40 pounds, lose 40 pounds.
It's another method actor there, Gary, just saying.
Well,
it's another method actor.
And, you know, I really enjoy his performances, and I think that if he doesn't go too crazy and kill himself, I think he's going to have a long, successful career ahead.
God, I hope not.
I'm going to say that he's also on our list.
Okay. He's on the list. Anthony Hopkins.
Sir Anthony Hopkins.
It's a tough one. This is a tough one. And, okay.
Yeah.
I mean...
So Anthony Hopkins has been acting also at least since the early 60s. Been in, you know, dozens and dozens of movies. His most famous role
most iconic
is probably The Silence of the Lambs. I mean, he's on that screen for like 19, 20 minutes or so. But if you see Silence of the Lambs... Hannibal Lecter is what you walk away with, and that is a powerful and meaningful statement to be able to make as an actor, to be able to steal an entire movie.
People would argue that his role as Hannibal Lecter, even for that 19, 20 minutes, however long the exact time, it didn't just make his career, and that's his monumental role. That's what people compare and that must be such a shame to be him. It must be so frustrating because no matter what he does, he flew too close to the sun back in the early 90s. 30 years ago, he flew as close to the sun as anybody can get. That's not only, I think, the best antagonist role ever played of all time. I think that's one of the best roles in general played of all time.
Yeah, what's interesting is he did that kind of mid-career for him because you know he'd already been acting for 30 years, so he was able to
60 years acting.
Get that high water mark in there.
Right, but it's almost like a Peter Jackson kind of thing. For those of you that are not Peter Jackson purists, the Lord of the Rings trilogy is what really put him on the map. And then since then, it's just like, when are you going to make something as good as Fellowship, or when are you going to make something as legendary as Return of the King?
Or why don't you stop making things?
It's true.
That's
it could just
another
retire.
thing that people could say,
and stop making crap like Kong
and the Hobbit trilogy, which I don't blame you entirely for.
True,
I understand there was
another
pressure.
podcast will be for that on another day, for me at least. And Anthony Hopkins, as great as he was recently in The Two Popes, he's fantastic in Elephant Man.
A very cerebral actor, but I just
he's a British actor.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to make my top 10 though.
He couldn't on mine either, only because I feel like he has that. it's a blessing and a curse with the role of Hannibal Lecter. It's the role of a lifetime, but it's haunted him for the last 3 decades. I really do believe that. I'm not just saying shit to get a soundbite. I really do believe that.
Okay.
So unfortunately, fantastic performance and a good actor, but not enough for me here, and not enough for Gary apparently.
Yeah, I'm moving on. Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart,
Star of so many American classic films. It's a Wonderful Life.
If you haven't watched
Mr.
It's a
Smith
Wonderful
Goes
Life
to Washington
on Christmas Eve, then you're not a human being. It's not
Yeah.
that you're not an American or you're not whatever. You're not a human.
Yeah, It's a
You're an
Wonderful
alien.
Life is such a classic movie to watch. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington was, made in the 30s, and it's a Frank Capra film, and just beautifully done, especially the ending of it.
There was no actor at that time, and maybe in the history of film, that has genuinely brought out the inner common man. Or the inner common person, someone who is genuinely, you're just like, well, this guy could potentially be my next door neighbor, or this guy he reminds me of my father or something. And I think that's what made him so relatable to people. And he did that with what you're saying. And then when we get into the 60s and we see Alfred Hitchcock break through, watch our episode 3, our last episode on the 60s, and we'll talk about this a little bit. But with
Rear Window, he goes into the horror genre. Then he's also done, westerns, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, John Wayne.
And then you see that he's not just the leading man. He's not just the gawky, humble, kind, gentle soul. He's a guy that can lead an action movie. And actions back in that time, as you guys know, if they weren't a war movie, it was a western.
It was a western.
They were the actions back in those days. And and I always say this in It's a Wonderful Life, there's a particular scene where he's talking to Clarence, the angel, and he realizes that he's been erased from everyone's life. And it's the first time I've seen an Alfred Hitchcock looking shot in a Jimmy Stewart film, because it just goes, you hear the horns go boom, and he looks directly into the camera and looks around, and it's like a close shot up of his face. You didn't see shots like that in film back in that time. Anyways,
and then Vertigo, So Johnny, Jimmy Stewart, is he on your top 10 list?
I'm gonna put Jimmy Stewart as an argument for my top 10.
Okay.
So I'll highlight him for myself. I don't know if he'll make it, but I'm gonna highlight him anyways.
Okay, that's good. So, Jack Lemmon.
I'm gonna let you take more on the Jack Lemmon one. I am very familiar with Jack Lemmon when it comes to Some Like It Hot and The Odd Couple and anything he did with Walter Matthau.
Yeah.
I absolutely love. Great comedian, but he had a lot of dramatic roles that I'm actually not quite as familiar with.
Jack Lemmon also had a very long career, spanned 5-6 decades.
All these guys had long careers, every single one.
Right. Not Heath Ledger though. Jack Lemmon he can play so many wonderful characters and has a lot of memorable roles, and I really enjoy watching him in film. But I don't think that I would say that he would break into my top 10 simply because he doesn't have enough of the different types of movies that I like to see for a top 10 person. He's got excellent comedies. Some Like It Hot is a fantastic end scene to that movie. But I really love Jack Lemmon and so many of his movies, but I wouldn't put him in my top 10.
He really was, and I'll speak to his comedic timing and stuff. He really was one of the fathers of physical comedy.
Yeah.
Because if you look at, Walter Matthau was typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, he was the grumpy
older man
usually, and Jack Lemmon was typically like the little wiry spaz that was just, he was the neat freak, or he was the guy that would never shut up, but he always had the big mouth on him, and the way he was able to contort his body and like use his body for comedy was probably influential for people like a Robin Williams or people like really, anybody did it, Will Ferrell, Ben Stiller, anybody today that's popular.
The timing of how he delivered lines and the inflections he used on them was just stellar.
Yeah, but I think he's on the outside looking in for us, unfortunately.
Maybe this next person won't be.
We'll see.
Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman. Okay.
That's right, the bad guy in The Fifth Element.
One of the greatest, not only probably the greatest consistent supporting actor of all time, but one of the top 3 best character actors of all time.
Right, yeah.
For those of you that don't know, character actor is somebody who can go into a part and completely change who they are, and you won't notice them. If you've ever seen True Romance, if you've ever seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, if you've ever seen even Air Force One,
right, yeah,
he completely changes his physicality. He completely changes. I talked about it earlier. The cadence in his speech and
how he moves his body,
the tone of his voice, just the volume. Just he picks up dialect so well. It's just so difficult to hear where he is, because he's not necessarily never had the chance to be a leading man, just because he doesn't necessarily have the look for it, and he doesn't quite have that leading man quality. He needs to have a character portion, as was brought true in The Darkest Hour, where he finally won Best Actor for playing Winston Churchill.
Right.
I think that's it's tainted his reputation a little bit when talking about a list like this.
Yeah, I think I'd still put him on my top 10.
I would still put him in my consideration for a top 10, absolutely.
Okay, all right then.
All right.
Consideration.
Okay, moving on.
Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy, an icon for decades in the movie business. Most famous, more even than his movies, was probably for his love affair with Katharine Hepburn. There was a romance that occurred over something like 2 decades. And, they had, I think, 9 movies together, and they were just fantastic to watch. Spencer Tracy he's a really well-timed actor, both in drama and in comedy. Not really seeing him like as an action star as in anything, but
no.
He really understood, I think, how to display human emotions and have those get captured correctly on screen. If you haven't had a chance to watch any of his movies, he's got so many excellent ones, but I would probably recommend Guess Who's Coming to Dinner to start with.
Absolutely, and that was one that we talked about in episode 3. Go back and listen. Between that and honestly the original Father of the Bride, they had that remake with Steve Martin a while back, which was hilarious. Spencer Tracy was very good at comedy. He really was. He typically played kind of almost like the Walter Matthau a little bit, just kinder, much more gentle,
much more subtle. Yeah.
I usually saw him as pretty much every movie I ever saw him in, outside of those ones. Boys Town as well. He played the guidance. He was the guidance in the film. He was the father figure, and he was very good at it. I was like, this. He reminds me of my grandfather. They also looked very similar, but I just never saw that diversity in the roles that he played. Maybe he could have done it, but everything I had ever seen him in, even past the 3 we mentioned, and we've seen a lot of his movies. He was just, for me, he was always overshadowed by Katharine Hepburn, and she is definitely one of. Between actors and actresses, it doesn't matter. Yeah. She's one of the best of all time.
Exactly,
she's in my top 10 regardless of gender. It doesn't matter. But she always overshadowed him, in my opinion. And I think that really, he took a big hit with that.
Yeah, I would have really liked to have seen him play like some sort of a psycho or a killer. Nice. Like I don't know of any movies of his that he did that in.
Villain of any kind, really.
Yeah, so he's not going to be on my top 10 list.
Yeah, I'm going to have to concur on that one. Unfortunately, agree. But all right, this one's going to be a little more controversial. For those of you, Paul Newman is next on the list. Paul Newman's one of those guys that you know who he is, you know that he's famous, but you don't remember the movies he's in.
Right.
Now, granted, even for me, it took a minute, but then when I was looking at the list, I was like, every movie I've seen on here, he's been in. How did I forget about these? And then I just remember back to my childhood and my grandfather and my dad just like shoving these movies into my face, and just being like, hey, watch this. This is a classic. Hey, watch this. This is fantastic. Hey, watch this. This defined my years in college, this is my favorite movie. I saw it 80 times.
Plus, he makes a really bomb salad dressing. Yeah, that's Newman's own.
Great.
Yeah.
You can see we're also full of jokes here
yes.
on I Don't Give a Flick.
Paul Newman, a lot of iconic roles. Probably the one that sticks out for me most would be either Cool Hand Luke or The Hustler.
See, the Sting was always
Sting-
my
Sting
favorite.
was really good, too, and-
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was great. Color of Money's fantastic, but the Sting was just always my favorite.
Yeah.
You know, I love. I don't know.
Plotting movies like that. Yeah, and I do love
Redford.
Yeah, I do love Paul Newman. Again, though, I really don't think he's going to make my top 10 list.
You know, you would say that, and I think he kept himself relevant into the early 2000s before he really. Just with age, you start to decline in your abilities. It's not just athletes. Even your voice starts to go
Right.
out, or you can't stand on set for too long, or whatever. But in Road to Perdition, that's one of the better turn of the century mafia films. One of the last good ones. Outside, I guess, The Departed and
Gangs of New York.
Yeah, I wouldn't really consider Gangs of New York a mafia film, though.
Yeah, you're right.
But a great movie, just
Yeah.
A different era. And then Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, that movie, it kept you on edge the entire time. Not necessarily because it's a psychological thriller or anything like that, but just to hear what happens next. In classic Tennessee Williams play, but he's just been so diverse for me. I would have to barely keep him on the outside looking in. I would move him up from the spot we currently have in the top 20, and I would put him in my top 15, but I don't think he would make my top 10, unfortunately.
Okay.
I didn't see enough range with him. It sucks.
Okay, all right. Our next actor is Al Pacino, a man who has been nominated 9 times and won once.
I knew that he won for Scent of a Woman, I remember, but
Ooh-ah.
did he only won once? I thought he won for Godfather.
We'll check the system, but Al Pacino, most famous, of course, probably for Jack and Jill, which was
stop making that joke. No one finds it funny except you.
I do find it funny. But yeah, most famous for The Godfather. Generally plays a bad guy or a guy that's troubled by some demons. Yeah. Or the devil himself. In The Devil's Advocate.
Yeah. Always a gruff, nasty, gritty character.
Yeah.
And that was hard because you don't see him in a ton of other stuff outside of those roles.
Right.
You can't point to Jack and Jill and be like, oh yeah, the worst Adam Sandler movie ever made.
Yeah, that's true.
Loved him in that. I think from the majority of his roles that we've seen him in, I really do feel that I just don't feel like he's able to play the bad guy, he's able to play a cop, he's able to play a guy undercover, he's able to play a mobster, a secret agent, he's able to play the devil himself. But he's never played that vulnerable, timid, docile character. He's never really played that romantic leading man as much as I would have wanted him to. I've never really seen him in that comedic role that made me laugh so hard that my belly started to hurt kind of thing,
Yeah.
I think that's a mark against him. I love Al Pacino. I think that he's one of those actors that, it's like a Joe Pesci kind of thing. Every fucking movie that he's in, I love his part. I love him, but it's just not diverse enough for me. So
not enough to vote for him, though. Okay. Yeah. Al Pacino, he, especially before the mid 2010s, like I haven't seen him try and do much acting anymore. I mean, he's getting on up there in years, but just for so many decades, he was a very iconic actor.
True.
I think I'm going to also say he's on my outside looking in.
It's tough. Sorry, Al Pacino, not to be confused with an Al Cappuccino.
Yes, or Dunkachino.
Or a Dunkachino.
Jack and Jill.
Jack and Jill.
In theaters now.
No, it came out a long time ago.
Oh,
Don't see it.
Okay.
Sean Penn.
Sean Penn.
Okay.
Enough said.
Here we go. Sean Penn, that's right. We're in our top 13 now. Here's where it is. My favorite types of actors are the actors that do not play themselves repeatedly. It's okay to see a lot of actors, and even actors as ourselves, we take prior experiences or different tricks of the trade that we learned or pieces from another part we played previously, and we will use that in a new character. There is nothing wrong with that. But I'm consistently seeing the same person over and over again. That's when I get bored. That's when I get just like jaded by the whole process. I'm like, we've already gone through this. We've done the whole song and dance. Give me something new. Come on. You know, and Sean Penn doesn't do that. Sean Penn is one of those actors that just, he comes at you every single way, and he's always knocking you on your ass. You know, if a lot of people said, in fact, Robert Downey Jr. joked about it in Tropic Thunder, saying that Sean Penn went full retard, is what he was saying, you know. Still a word that we're not condoning, but that is what he said.
Full retard.
Yeah, but that is what he said, you know. I did think Sean Penn, I mean, if you're comparing it to, you know, Rain Man, or Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, or Tom Hanks' Forrest Gump, yeah, I mean, I guess he went a little over, but he was actually supposed to have some form of Down syndrome, and the other two guys were more, you know, they're more just like below average intelligence. You know, I think Dustin Hoffman's character was in Asperger's or something like that. I mean, remember.
Sean Penn played that, I think, very honestly and openly.
He did. I loved it.
It just didn't win the Best Actor award that year for I Am Sam. I think. Yeah.
But then he jumps from that to Mystic River. Have you seen Mystic River?
Yeah, you bought me a DVD of it, I believe. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. My favorite Clint Eastwood film, honestly, where he and Tim Robbins both took home Best Leading Actor and Best Supporting. But he plays a gangster, a hitman in that, and then you jump to Milk, where he plays the first gay, outwardly gay public elected official in the history of America.
Yeah, in San Francisco, I think it was.
Exactly, in San Francisco. And then, to start his career out, or one of the larger roles he had, he plays a pot-smoking, high school dropout, basebly, playing Spicoli.
In Breakfast Club, right?
No. Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh, yes, okay.
You know, Sean Penn's one of those other guys that he hasn't had as kind of like a Daniel Day-Lewis almost. Not quite. You know, Day-Lewis I think has like 20 or 25 overall movies to his credit over like a 40-year career. Penn's got a little more, but he doesn't have as many. He doesn't have quite as many films altogether as a lot of these other guys do. But I think he's done a very good job of selecting the ones he knows that he can make a difference with, and make people's eyes open up to the world around them that they don't know, outside of their bubble, you know, make them think outside of their own reality. And that's what I really think the job of an actor is. I don't know, what do you think? He's in my top 10 for sure. I don't think I've an argument on that
Sean
one.
Penn, I don't think that he churns out movies like widgets like some of the actors do, where it's just like, hey, I'm going to do 3 movies a year.
Yeah.
And so he can be much more selective and take a lot more time with crafting these. You know,
he's also dated Robin Wright and Madonna.
He's married to them both, not at the same time.
Well, that'd be cool. Anyway.
That would be a terrible household. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to not put him on my list though. So that'll be interesting.
You get the hell out of this house right now.
Well, Johnny, when we still have a lot of people to go, so you're going to start getting pretty tight here.
You're right.
Johnny, who's our next person?
Christian Bale.
Yes.
Christian Bale, the prodigy, okay? The child that started in a movie musical. And how many people from movie musicals actually go on to have really illustrious careers, you know? I mean,
Mickey Rooney.
Okay, there's some, you know. I mean, I guess Zac Efron to a lesser extent, you know. I guess I don't know where Julie Andrews started. I guess she was actually in her 30s when they were doing Sound of Music.
Yeah.
Anyways, but for those of you that don't know, Christian Bale, one of his first films was in The Newsies. And I mean, no one... So I'll give you an example. When he played George W. Bush's vice president, Dick Cheney, excuse me. I was thinking
Don Cheadle.
Don Cheadle for a second, or Donald King. Anyways, when he played Dick Cheney, between gaining all the weight, and obviously there were some prosthetics on it, you know, gaining like 60, 70 pounds to play off the role.
Yeah.
And then in The Fighter, where he was about 140 pounds, 150 pounds, he then put on an additional 55 pounds in 6 months that same year to play Bruce Wayne in Batman again.
Yeah.
No? And
so a lot of protein and a lot of working out.
Once again, I talk those actors that they don't even have to be method, but if they have the dedication to the craft like that, and they can make you not realize that they're actually in the film performing, those are the actors that I will put on my top 10. Christian Bale is going to be, I'm highlighting him for sure.
I'll put him on my top 10 as well.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys, not done yet, still a young career, still got a couple decades left to contend with some of the gentlemen that are 6 feet under or are in their 70s and 80s. But between The Fighter and Vice and and even the Batman series, even Newsies, and American Psycho, he's just played such a wide variety of characters, and he brings it home every time.
And The Big Short,
Big Short, American Hustle. I mean, the list goes on and on. Anyways, he'll be in for me.
Yeah. Okay, and now one of the most overrated actors of all time.
No.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Boo. And I'm saying boo to Gary. I'm not saying boo to Leonardo DiCaprio.
No, we all heard it, Johnny. He booed Leonardo DiCaprio.
No, the man, I'll give you this. The man
Johnny
gets
loves
cast,
Titanic.
Listen, no, I
He
don't like
loves
Titanic.
Titanic.
That's my
It's his
least favorite movie
of all
his.
time.
Overrated.
Nope, he loves it.
Not like DiCaprio.
He was watching it earlier today. I saw him.
All right. Anyways, my point is, DiCaprio was like the Humphrey Bogart of this era. The fact that he got a lot of those.
That's a hell of a statement.
It is, but it is. But you talk about a guy that can control an era. Can you name another actor outside Leonardo DiCaprio that really controlled, the 2000s?
I don't know if any actor controlled the 2000s.
But who was more iconic than DiCaprio?
The Rock.
Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
I'm talking with serious roles. I'm not talking with And I love Dwayne. Dwayne Johnson's hilarious, but.
In the 2000s, I'd have to think on that.
There's other actors that were popular,
right?
But who, outside of maybe a Tom Cruise, a Tom Cruise, or maybe a Tom Hanks at some point, who's consistently been Hollywood's top billed dramatic guy, like leading man, got the looks, got the talent for it. I know a lot of people say that DiCaprio is overrated, and I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but honest to God, why do you think he's overrated, Gary? Let me know.
Well, when he first started out from Eating Gilbert Grape, Titanic would be like the big one. I was like, this kid is so overrated. He's just a pretty face. And the Quick and the Dead. I was like, okay. But I will say I was proven wrong, because over the years he's done a lot of movies that I was really impressed with, including like The Departed. One of my favorite stories from any movie being made is when he was filming Django Unchained. I think that's how you say it, right?
Django Unchained. The D is silent.
Oh, okay, thank you. He smashes a glass in his hand, and he cuts his hand. And then he smears the blood over the actress's face, which is terribly unsanitary. But it really played into using what you had. So I gave him a lot of respect for that. Although I would have been very unhappy if I had been the actor who he did that to. But
that's the thing.
Yeah.
Great actors roll with the punches, and great actors roll with what comes at them. And the fact that he told Tarantino, let's keep rolling.
Yeah.
Like you just said, that sets him apart. So you look at this, Wolf of Wall Street. Honestly, Django Unchained, another one. Shutter Island. The movie itself was not that great, but his performance was. I had never seen from him true insanity pushed to the brink of self-destruction like that. At least for him. Between that and like the Aviator, him and Howard Hughes. Like he just plays. You're right. He gets a lot of really good scripts and a lot of very well developed characters. But then I take a role like The Revenant, which I know you hated the movie, and I know you guys said he shouldn't have won Best Actor for that. But how often have I said that I love, outside of the character actor choices, to convey emotion through physical body movement and grunts and sighs and yawns and hums and whatever. If you can do that without using words, that's truly special.
Yeah.
That really is. And the movie Revenant itself, I didn't really care for that much, but his performance, I think, was long overdue, first off, and second off, I thought it was well deserved.
Yeah, I think he's definitely one of the most serious actors that we have in Hollywood. Like, I think that he actually works at it, whereas a lot of other actors kind of just are like, hey, I'm going to be me and go out there and be filmed.
Yep.
And I don't see that with him. And actually, most of the people that are making this list will make our top 10 lists. You don't see that with either.
True.
So Leonardo DiCaprio, I think, is a yes for both of us.
Correct.
All right, number 10.
Okay, and I think once we get into the 10 here, I'm going to start. You're going to see me start cutting people down. Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman, yes.
Go ahead.
Been in film for decades. I think I already talked about him earlier.
All these guys have been in film for decades. Yeah.
So, Gene Hackman's a wonderful actor. He can play, very serious roles. Crimson Tide being one of them. To The Birdcage, which is it's a heavy movie when you look at it, but it's also got a lot of light parts to it.
So ahead of its time.
Yeah,
Really was so ahead of its time.
And then he's got the Superman movies, the real ones.
Unforgiven, The French Connection, Mississippi Burning.
Yeah. He's just been in so many serious and really intense and enjoyable movies. The Replacements.
The Hoosiers.
Yeah.
Look, Gene, I mean, we could go all... Gene Hackman has had such a long career. We could go on all day. And I think he is very talented. He was so far up on our list because memorable roles and his nominations. He has 2 wins, too, and those counted heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And he has played a fairly diverse role of characters, But for me, Gene Hackman, he's never done anything. He's done sellout movies. I think most actors have at this point in their lives.
Right,
They've been acting for 40, 50 years. But I think for Gene Hackman, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like, I always enjoy watching him, but I see it's once again for me it's that same thing. It's I just see too much of him all the time. I don't see enough of different characters in him. He wouldn't be in my top 10. I couldn't make it.
And again, it's important to know this list isn't enjoyability of watching the actors. It's how well they do their craft. So that's an important distinction. Gene Hackman, I love you, but also would not make my top 10. Yeah.
Okay.
Number 9, Denzel Washington.
Denzel, one of probably
King Kong ain't got shit on me.
Man, this is just it ain't checkers. Okay, for those of you that don't know, that's from Training Day. That's probably my favorite movie of his, next to Remember the Titans. But there's so many.
Yes.
There's so many. God, Denzel Washington is another guy like a different type of Gene Hackman. He's another guy that's great at playing himself. He's always the calm and cool, collected guy he's in charge, and he has such a fierce intensity with his gaze.
Right.
There's no actor in the history of Hollywood that has that fierce intensity like Denzel Washington does. And I think my favorite role of his outside of Training Day was a movie called Fences, which came out only a couple years ago, actually. He was great in Glory, too. Loved it. But Fences in particular, alongside Viola Davis. I had seen him stray away from the leading man with a chip on his shoulder, troubled past. He was an alcoholic in this one, like he normally is in most of his films.
Yeah.
But, he plays himself too much. I've never seen a movie and been like, I wonder if that's Denzel Washington or not.
Yeah,
No, I recognize him every time.
You can recognize his movements.
Yeah.
He did, though, he did get to act with John Goodman in Flight, which was a highlight of his career, I believe.
Whatever. That was a good scene, though. That was a good scene. And I like Flight, too. You know what? Denzel is always going to go down as probably the best badass in the history of Hollywood. I'd say at least top 3. He's just a badass motherfucker. He really is. And he does have he's great at dramas. He's good at romance. I've only seen him do one comedy really in the movie called The Preacher's Wife. It was with Whitney Houston back in the 90s. Huge case of nostalgia. My mom used to love that film. We used to watch it all the time.
Right, but not making the cut?
Not making the cut for me.
Okay. I love Denzel as well, and he's done so many great movies. But yeah,
he's a great actor.
I think we see too much of him in all of his roles. I appreciate that he does in a lot of ways try and stretch himself, but I think he's got a very strong personality that comes through.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on up.
Speaking of people that have strong personalities, Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando.
Don Corleone himself. I think Marlon Brando definitely, again, is another one of those actors that really will change themselves for the role. Marlon Brando famously gained and lost a lot of weight, at various times of his career to fill out various roles. and he's been in everything from musicals like Guys and Dolls to serious dramatic plays that have been turned into movies.
Streetcar Named Desire.
Stella. To Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, where he was in that movie for 5 minutes or less. They
yeah.
talked about him the entire time, but you don't recognize it's him.
Yeah,
you don't recognize even in the voice. Like you can kind of hear it, just like with any actor for the most part. You can kind of hear it, but like you're saying, man. I should have been a contender.
Yeah.
I mean, On the Waterfront was another one of those films where he transformed himself in so many ways that he just becomes unrecognizable, but still so. It's just so enticing to watch his parts, even if it's only for 5 minutes,
Yeah, and I think he was willing in a lot of ways to take risks,
That's rare, especially for that time period,
Yeah.
too. The 50s in particular and granted this, and I always go back to the studio system when we talk about older actors because it was such a pivotal shift in American cinema. And even during that time, he came around a little later. He wasn't quite as early as Bogart and Gable and Stewart and all those guys. They overlapped for sure, but he in the 50s, when he started coming around, I like that he took those risks. It paid off.
I would say Marlon Brando would make my list.
I would say he's up for consideration on my list. Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Next is Robin Williams, who you want to talk about a guy that changes his voice. This is one of them. A point of note is we gave Robin Williams the highest score out of anyone for the number of memorable roles that he did.
And I don't really think anybody could argue with that as far as memorable roles goes.
At least people that are, that were born in the 80s and 90s. I think he's done so many movies that affected you, from the Dead Poets Society.
To Good Will Hunting.
To Aladdin.
To Patch Adams.
Yeah, I mean, he's just done a remarkable body of work.
To Mrs. Doubtfire.
To Mrs.
Can
Doubtfire.
we talk about Mrs. Doubtfire? Can we talk about the guy on this list that this guy has made me laugh so hard that I've farted and busted a gut?
Yeah.
So many. I lost count. I really have. And I'm even tearing up a little talking about him. I was absolutely devastated the day that he passed away.
Yeah.
The day that he took his own life.
Yeah.
It just shows you that, the depression thing is real, even if you're a rich Hollywood star with millions of dollars and a loving family. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter,
Now, Robin Williams never really did much to change his appearance in movies as some of the other actors did.
Yeah, not
but in terms of how he moved and how he sounded, especially, I think he changed his appearance as much or more than almost anybody else on the set.
Yeah.
Or on this list.
One thing with him, he made me laugh. He made me cry.
Right.
He made me think, and he made me reflect. From Good Morning Vietnam to Jacob the Liar to Good Will Hunting to Mrs. Doubt, any of them, it didn't matter. He made me do that. Here's my only point of contention with Robin Williams is I don't think he mastered the art of physical comedy because he started out as a comedian.
Right, yeah.
Really young. Went to Juilliard, did his whole thing. He had classical training for sure. But I feel like he didn't necessarily match the physicality with the character correctly in every film. That was my biggest problem with him.
Okay.
Was the fact that I saw too much. I saw the same type of comedic gestures and fast twitchy movements. They might have been dumbed down a little bit for more serious roles, but I still saw them a fair amount, and so it reminded me quicker of, oh, hey, I just saw that in a movie of his that came out 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And so, but as far as just being a character actor, line delivery, he was definitely one of the best.
Yeah, and two of my favorite dramatic works of his are Being Human, which is almost impossible to find a copy of anywhere, and Bicentennial Man, which Johnny hates.
I do hate that movie.
So
It's just boring. It was mainly boring, and I saw it when I was 12. I
Yeah.
haven't seen it since then, so maybe I'd like it if I saw it again.
I really love Robin Williams, and this is a real tough one to kind of divide between, do I keep him on my list of best actors? Because when you have a list of best actors, you have this vision in your head of what that should be like, and Robin Williams, I don't think fits that vision. But after having talked about him just now, I think I am going to have to put him on my list.
You know what? It's funny. We just flip flopped. I was going to have him on my list, and then I talked about him.
Yeah.
And compared to a lot of these other guys, I feel like he didn't change it enough. He would be he would be an honorable mention for me at 11 or 12, but I don't think I can put him on mine.
Okay. All right, then.
That's just me, though.
Okay.
So you highlight him for you.
Mr. Bobby De Niro.
Robert De Niro. Can you think of another actor who personifies the Italian gangster better than Robert De Niro? Can you? Maybe Marlon Brando, maybe Al Pacino, maybe. I still don't think they have anything on De Niro. But the cool thing about De Niro is, ladies and gentlemen, Robert De Niro is not just a gangster. He's not just a member of the mafia, okay? Have you seen Meet the Parents? Have you seen Meet the Fockers? Have you seen how funny this guy actually is? Have you seen the versatility?
Have you seen Joker? That's a hilarious scene at the end.
Yeah, where he gets shot in the head. Yeah, that's great.
Because what? You get what you fucking deserve.
You know, De Niro, between Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, my favorite movie all time.
Johnny does like Goodfellas. I can attest to that.
Between Godfather Part 2, you know, another and Raging Bull. You know, for those of you that haven't seen Raging Bull, that's one of Scorsese's least talked about fantastic, you know, trophy films. De Niro, he's just always had the ability to. He's just always has the ability to capture you with this very. It's a very down to earth, know it all style of talking, and I don't really know any other way to describe it outside of that. When he's outside of a mafia role,
okay.
He's very low key, but he looks at you directly, and he's talking like he knows what he's talking about, but at the same time, I feel like he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Okay,
but it makes
fair
me
enough.
feel safe.
Yeah.
It makes me feel safe, and I'm okay with it.
I love feeling safe with Robert De Niro.
With Robert De Niro. I've always admired De Niro for the longevity of his career, and the fact that he is able to be a leading man. He's played the psychotic roles. You know, he's just been so entrenched in the mafia roles, mainly because his connection to Scorsese for sure. But he's branched out absolutely, and I think he's done a good job with that.
And he did, I think, gain 50 pounds for Raging Bull. So, you know.
Did he?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It seems to be.
I think he's actually got the award for like the actor that gained the most weight.
Really?
For a role.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Internet, you can fact check me on that. So, Johnny, does Robert De Niro make your list?
You know, originally he was going to,
Or
but
did he make you an offer that you could refuse?
I guess he does fall into that because he played a young Don Corleone.
Boom.
But I'm going to have to say no, unfortunately. Robert De Niro is one of those guys like Robin Williams for me. That's in my outside looking in.
Okay, yeah.
Honorable mention.
I will say Robert De Niro does not make my list either.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy a lot of his films.
Yeah, very underrated actor. But
Right.
only so many spots.
Tom Hanks,
Okay.
the pretty much iconic
Next to
American actor from
Pretty much.
the 80s through today, really.
Today, really. Yeah. The only guy that I think could take on DiCaprio's title for the 2000s, you know, is like the most in-demand dramatic actor for that decade.
Now,
What do you say about a man that's played Walt Disney, Mr. Rogers, Forrest Gump, Captain Phillips?
Yeah.
You know, a gay lawyer who contracted AIDS.
Yeah.
You know, an English teacher turned general in World War II.
A man-child that jumps on a big piano.
He jumps on a big piano.
Yeah, you know, he's just been in so many iconic roles, you know. A millionaire bookseller that falls in love with the girl at the shop around the corner.
Oh, God. See, that's the thing. Tom Hanks is one of the only actors in Hollywood that I feel hasn't sold out quite yet. Not as much as other people. Maybe one or two films, maybe. But you look at everything he did with Meg Ryan, from Joe versus the Volcano to Sleepless in Seattle to your favorite.
Yeah, You've Got Mail.
Yeah, those rom-coms are just, when you think of rom-com, Tom Hanks is, you know, like a Matthew McConaughey or like a, I don't know who else, I don't see a ton of rom-coms, you know, but Tom Hanks would fall under that list for me as actors who would be in high demand for that. But then you talk about a character actor or a leading man.
Right, yeah.
And you look at a bunch of the ones that we just named, you know. And in the 80s, people forget, he did a fair amount of, you know, Turner and Hooch. That was a cop action film.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic movie. I loved that as a kid. You know, it's about, for those that don't know, it's just a policeman who's got this really special relationship with
A human.
With his dog.
Well, the dog's a policeman, too.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, you don't see... it's just like DiCaprio. You know, he gets handed a lot of really good scripts with very well developed characters.
That's definitely been the most important part of his career. I think is really good scripts. For me, it's an easy one. I'm putting Tom Hanks on my list.
There's no debate for me. I'm in agreement with you.
Okay. Up next is Dustin Hoffman.
One of my
Least
top two,
favorite actors.
Nope, one of my top two favorite actors of all time.
Called that one wrong.
You know, there had been a rumor for a long time, even though I've never been able to prove this online. Maybe my grandfather just made it up, but he said that in Tootsie, Dustin Hoffman did such a good job playing a woman that the Academy didn't know whether to nominate him for Best Actor in a Leading Role or Best Actress in a Leading Role.
That would have been hilarious.
It would have. I don't think it's true. I think my grandfather said that to make a joke, but I was also 15 at the time, so I believed him. I mean, you know, where do you start with a guy like Dustin Hoffman? I had seen Hook probably a dozen times from the ages of 5 to 20, and finally when I was 20 years old, I figured out he was Captain Hook.
Right, yeah.
I've been watching and studying film almost my entire life, and I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah.
How did I not pick up on that? Maybe I was enamored by the performance, and so I loved the actor. I don't know. I was like, oh, Robin Williams and Julia Roberts are in this, so that's good enough for me.
Yeah, Julia Roberts is in that. She's Tinkerbell, isn't she?
Yeah.
And you know, he's been in so many movies, even from the early '60s. You think of The Graduate, you know, a young him that kind of represents like people coming back from college in California, being, you know, well-to-do and not knowing what to do with themselves, and just sort of being an icon for that niche of people.
Exactly. It's one of those things where you go from Rain Man, you got The Graduate, you've got Tootsie, you've got a less well-known one that's still one of my favorites, Kramer versus Kramer, where he won his first Oscar for that, actually. Midnight Cowboy. Hey, I'm walking here.
Yep, yeah, that was an improvised line. We'll have a whole segment on improvised lines.
All the President's Men, Marathon Outbreak, Meet the Fockers. You know, Dustin Hoffman it's so funny because he was the unconventional leading man back in the 80s and 90s. He's not, I'm not going to lie, guys, he's not that good looking of a dude. He's not. He's short, he's got a big nose, kind of looks, he's like an older version of Steve Carell, almost.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
But the acting chops were just there.
Yeah.
And so he kept getting roles, you know, and I don't blame him. He's one of the fact that I couldn't figure out he was Hook until I was 20. You know, maybe, I'm an idiot kind of thing, sure, but...
I didn't know he was Tootsie until just now.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm shocked.
You know, there's just... there's a really famous, Gary, I'll let you tell it, from Marathon Man, the interaction between him and one of our other actors here on the top 5.
Yeah, so Dustin Hoffman very famously is a method actor, which for those of you who don't know is the lesser form of acting where people take on the emotions and then they pretend to be the person. And then Laurence Olivier is a very famous technical actor, which is an actor that just pretends to puts on the mask of what the character they're playing. So one's an internal and one's an external kind of approach. And so in the movie Marathon Man, Dustin Hoffman is being tortured in one scene. So the real Dustin Hoffman stays up for 3 days, doesn't eat, doesn't shower, doesn't sleep. So he's just really mentally and, you know, emotionally where his character needs to be. Whereas Laurence Olivier, who's an older actor at this time, is, you know, just living his normal life and comes into work. And once they're done with the scene, you know, Dustin Hoffman is kind of just shaking because he's taking his body to the breaking point. And Laurence Olivier says to him, "My dear boy, it's called acting." And that's a great story. Great story.
Pretentious dick.
Well,
Laurence Olivier.
Yes.
Pretentious dick.
Well,
I don't care how good of an actor he was. He was a fantastic actor. You know, yeah, for me, for the longest time, when I was in high school and even in college, Dustin Hoffman was my favorite. Now he's still one of those top 3 kind of guys, but he just, you know, he brings something new every single time. You know, he's one of those guys that completely changes the physical, completely changes the voice, which is a big thing for me. You got to change the voice. I can't recognize that it's you.
Yes, absolutely. So would you put him on your top 10 list?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I'm going to put him there, and we may have to whittle that down later because I think we're getting pretty close. All right. Daniel Day-Lewis.
Oof. You know, Daniel Day-Lewis, it fluctuates between him and Dustin Hoffman and another actor for me, and I'll let us talk about the other actor in a second. But yeah, it's the same thing. You know, Daniel Day-Lewis, the epitome of someone who typically doesn't sell out and actually picks their roles carefully.
Yes.
20 movies on his IMDb. The guy's been around for 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? That blows my mind. Are you kidding me?
Very interestingly, Daniel Day-Lewis, probably more than anyone else on this list, represents the ideal of method acting. And
absolutely.
we could do a whole debate-filled podcast on method and technical.
We could.
But you know, it's you know, he's the guy. Like, if he's gonna play somebody who, you know, murders somebody in a movie and you know, chops them up and puts them in their basement, he's gonna do that in real life before, you know, he does the movie. So he really understands how that feels. Like when he played Lincoln, he actually went back in time and swapped out bodies with Lincoln.
Yeah? Oh, did he? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Look, no one... Daniel Day-Lewis is probably the greatest character actor. I mean, I would put him on. I'd put him almost a tiny notch above Dustin Hoffman and on the same level as a Gary Oldman, where he's so good you can't recognize him. Look, if you see some of his earlier films, most notably The Crucible, My Left Foot, and Last of the Mohicans, he put on a fair amount of weight for those. You know, he's not the biggest guy around.
No,
he's
fairly
tall.
slender.
He's slender. He's tall. He's about 6'2", but he doesn't weigh very much. But for those movies in particular, he put on a lot of mass, you know. And those roles were, for the most part, they were similar. They were still different, but that era was where a lot of his roles were pretty similar. You know, My Left Foot, I guess, wasn't the most, but once you come in, the fact that he didn't win an Oscar for Gangs of New York still pisses me off to this day.
That is pretty crazy.
Still pisses me off.
Who won it that year? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
But
Talk about him.
You know, Gangs of New York is just a fantastic movie all the way around, and it was Daniel Day-Lewis's performance in that movie that made it so fantastic. He was also in like another movie, There Will Be Blood, which was a really slow movie.
Adrian Brody for The Pianist.
Adrian Brody.
I mean, that was a good performance, but it wasn't as good as Bill the Butcher.
Yeah, Bill the Butcher was a once-in-a-lifetime role.
Yep, that's like a Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
For me, that's one of the best antagonists up there, top three, that and Heath Ledger's Joker.
Yeah.
For me, at least. Then Daniel Plainview.
Yeah, Daniel Plainview.
From maybe, you know, and that may be his... I thought he did better in that than he did in Lincoln. I mean, for me, it goes Daniel Plainview for There Will Be Blood, and then Bill the Butcher for Gangs of New York, and then probably Abraham Lincoln and Lincoln.
And I think you'd agree with me on this, Johnny. The entertainment value may differ, but the quality is always there. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Like Phantom Thread, I think is like the most boring movie like ever in the history of movies.
Remember you told me that.
Yes. But like Daniel Day-Lewis does a great job in the performance. You know, he's just as good in that as he is in The Crucible.
Right.
It's just the material he's working with is much different. So I think Daniel Day-Lewis is one of maybe the top two, like highest quality, highest consistent quality, loves their craft, you know, on this list.
Absolutely. And the only reason he's not number one, honestly, if he had done more than, 20-something movies throughout his career, yeah, I mean, he'd be above Laurence Olivier and Jack Nicholson.
Maybe.
You know, I think he would be. I think with wins and nominations, I just don't think he did enough films.
Yeah.
You know, and he's the only actor in history to win 3 Best Actors in a Leading Role, and there have been other actors to win.
Yeah.
2 and 2 for leading actor, and then 1 for supporting. But he's the only one to do it for the Gentleman.
Yes, definitely.
So my top 10, it's not even a competition. I mean, that's top 3 for me, easy.
Okay, and then moving on to Lord Laurence Olivier, famous, probably the most famous technical actor on this list.
How did he start?
He started playing in theater houses in England. Believe it or not, he was English. And then
Big surprise.
moved into film once that started to come around and develop itself. He always would go back and do theater shows and productions, but very famous in the film industry in like the late 30s through the 40s. And then, that kind of died off as he went back to stage work. But Laurence Olivier pretty much did almost all of the Shakespeare adaptations that you think of that are in black and white. So Hamlet, black and white with the skull, that's Laurence Olivier. Wuthering Heights, I think that was 39 or something, Laurence Olivier. And the thing for Laurence Olivier, like, I can't tell who he is in a lot of his movies because he does such a great job, like a phenomenal job of putting on makeups and prosthetics because he's from the theater world, so they do that all the time.
Yeah, he did learn to do a lot of his own at a pretty young age, from what I remember, right?
Yeah, and he's just he will think about, like, he's I think Daniel Day-Lewis also does this in a lot of ways, and Leonardo DiCaprio too. They'll think about what their character is. I know Laurence Olivier would then like write out what his character's background was and what he was doing and feeling, and so really spend time to do that. Right. So I would have no hesitation putting him on my top 10 list.
See, here the thing with it, God, Shakespeare for some people is so boring. Okay, for me, not really. For you, definitely not. But if you're not familiar with him, Laurence Olivier is one of those actors. He's further back than Marlon Brando. You need to go and watch some of his stuff here. I mean, he was great as that Denison Marathon Man. I love The Prince and the Showgirl. That's one of my favorite movies of his. And he hated Marilyn Monroe. And granted, Marilyn Monroe was a pill to work with. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people said this
and
about
she took
her.
a lot of pills.
She did. Unfortunately, she did.
You are what you eat.
Unfortunately, one of the most underrated overall actresses of all time. She studied at the New York School of Acting with Lee Strasberg for a long time. Anyways, I'll get into that when we get into Best Actresses. But if you haven't seen Hamlet or Henry V, I've only seen the 48 Hamlet. I haven't seen the Henry V. I'll tell you that. But the fact that he can make you feel a character that Shakespeare wrote, it's such a anomaly at this point in time, because it's not Shakespeare and Moliere and other Oliver Wilde and other playwrights from around. I guess they're not directly from
Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde, excuse me.
Yeah.
Did I say Olivia Wilde?
Oliver
Wilde.
Yeah. It is
Gene Wilder. I don't know. Their types of plays. Once you get into the Neil Simon era, towards like the mid 1900s and stuff like that. Those are what people like. They're like, oh, theater, this is fun. Well, theater wasn't really like that beforehand. It was, and even. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it got much more movement based when it used to be much more like intellectually movement based. I guess, because if you look at an Oliver Wilde play, like.
Give him the real name.
Yeah, an Oscar Wilde play, The Importance of Being Earnest, which is one of my absolute favorite plays, probably my second favorite play of all time. That's such a. We're really digressing here, but we
are.
Yeah,
but my point being, if you see these movies and they're both from the 40s,
right?
40s at this time, the fact that Laurence Olivier is able to bring that character to life, and you actually. Especially in Hamlet, which is my second favorite Shakespeare play behind Othello.
Which he also played in.
Yes. He did blackface. Not controversial at that time. Today it would be incredibly controversial.
Well, it wasn't blackface. He just, because blackface is like doing it to mock black people. He would just put it on to be, because it was required for the role.
Okay. I think we'd have to look up the Urban Dictionary definition, but we digress. Okay. Another tale for another day. But yeah, the fact that he was able to make it actually interesting and that you followed it.
Yeah.
It's rare to be able to do that. People are like, oh, Kenneth Branagh, or even Mel Gibson got a bunch of praise for when he played Hamlet and stuff. And
did he?
Yeah.
Okay.
He did.
All right.
These guys, they have nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing on Laurence Olivier. Like he just smashes it out of the park at the first at bat. Truly. One of the only technical actors I actually have enjoyed learning about. I don't agree with a lot of his acting philosophies like Gary does, but, I definitely respect the hell out of the guy, and I'd easily put him on my top 10. That's not even a competition.
Okay, and then our far and away number one rated actor, Jack Nicholson. Jack, he has 3 wins and 12 nominations. Count them, 12. So, I just
By far the most. What do you say about the here's Johnny? You know, I mean, like you have the Shining, you have Departed, you have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you have Chinatown. Yeah, I mean, it's just a guy that he didn't take a while. A lot of actors took a while to get rolling. Jack Nicholson hit the ground fucking running. The kid popped out of his mama's vajayjay and he was like, you know what? I'm gonna go act.
Yeah.
I'm only 3 minutes old, but I'm going to be the next star of Hollywood. And he's been doing it consistently for 50 years at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what his first role would be. I think like the earliest one I can think of him in is probably One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think that was the late 60s. But Jack Nicholson, again, I don't know if like...
Oh, it's a B movie titled The Crybaby Killer in 1958.
1958.
1958. He did Little Shop of Horrors, and then Anyways,
yeah, that's right. He was in Little Shop of Horrors. He was the dentist guy.
I mean, name another actor too that has had more iconic lines and scenes in the history of Hollywood than Jack Nicholson. There's not many.
Tom Hanks. Okay, yeah.
I mean, outside of I mean, there's some. You can obviously name a couple, but
Yeah, Jack, like he's just been in so many roles and so many different types of roles, and you really just like he plays a crazy Joker, or he plays like a stiff, stern army guy,
a hard ass,
in
A Few Good Men,
in A Few Good Men, or he plays a writer that's got mental issues and As Good as It Gets. He's so many different things, and he has an impressive body of work. All these people in the top 10 do, but Jack Nicholson definitely. And like, what I love about him is he just doesn't give a fuck on anything. Like, whenever I don't know if he goes to the Academy Awards anymore, but whenever he'd go there, he'd just be sitting there with his sunglasses on, just
hair.
I couldn't care less.
Hair looking like Danny DeVito in the later seasons, Always Sunny. And I mean, he's still a constant attendant at Lakers games.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's had courtside seats for 35 or 40 years.
Yeah, and I mean, he's just like, he is so much fun to watch.
He is.
I think I am going to have to include him on my.
Yeah, you know what? I think so. I think we'll include him.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right. So now comes the tough part, where we've got to whittle down this list to just the people that have made our initial cuts.
Okay.
Okay. So let me see. Did you put Denzel on there?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right then. So let's see. Our list consists of. Let's see. We've got to choose between Jack Nicholson, Laurence Olivier, Daniel Day-Lewis, Dustin Hoffman, Tom Hanks, Marlon Brando, Leonardo DiCaprio, Christian Bale, Sean Penn, Gary Oldman, Jimmy Stewart, Joaquin Phoenix, and for me, Peter O'Toole, which is 13. So we've got to take 3 out each.
It's all right. If you're still listening to us after 2 hours, then you probably want to hear the end. So let's just rank them. All right. So who we're taking out? You know what? As much as I love Jimmy Stewart, I just can't in good conscience. He was a versatile actor for his time, but I think that I'm a child of the realism movement and the realism era, and I didn't see enough diversity and enough change in his role. So for me, he's going to have to be taken out.
I think I'm going to keep him in for me.
Okay.
I think Sean Penn would have to go for me, though.
Okay.
What do you think?
I mean, would I take Sean Penn out in particular? No, I would not take Sean Penn out in particular.
Okay.
Sean Penn is in for me. That's not going to be the order that I go in.
No.
Okay, just put him in for now. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So put in there for me. Put in Joaquin Phoenix.
Okay, good.
Joaquin. I think I got to keep Joaquin in there. I know he's a lot younger, but I see greatness from the kid, and it wasn't definitely his most recent win for Joker put him over the edge for me. But I've always been high on him for a really long time.
Yeah, I think he's it's like trading hog futures. I think his stock's going to go up
for sure. For me, absolutely, I'm going to have to take out Jimmy Stewart, Peter O'Toole. And you know what? I hate saying it because I really do love the guy, but outside looking in, I'm gonna have to take DiCaprio out.
Oh.
I really am going to take DiCaprio.
Wow.
I gave it a lot of thought, but I'm going to have to take him out. I
Wow.
can't in good conscience keep him in there.
Okay. I'm going to keep Gary Oldman.
All right. I'll get you. So, yeah, Gary Oldman in there for me, too.
All right.
And Christian Bale, I guess, is in there for me at least.
You know what? Christian Bale, that's a tough one. You know, I think I'm gonna have to cut him.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, you want to be an idiot? That's fine.
Okay. All right. Marlon Brando, keeping, cutting.
Oh, keeping Marlon Brando. I'm keeping that top 6. I'm not messing with that.
Yeah, I think.
I'm taking all 6 of those. You can
Yeah, I
just throw
think
them
we're
all in
both gonna have to
there.
do
Okay.
that.
Copy and paste.
All right then. Do.
All right. So here's what we're doing, folks. So Gary, are we doing our own list, or are we going to force ourselves to combine lists?
I think we'll do our own list. That way, the audience can decide which one of us they like better.
Okay.
Little friendly competition.
I think it'd be more friendly competition if we do. Okay, that's fine. No, you're right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Do you think you have your number 10 already selected?
Yes, I'm going.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. Who you got?
Jimmy Stewart.
You are going Jimmy Stewart
Yeah.
early. Okay. All right. I definitely agree that he is probably the weakest on your list.
Okay. All right.
I'd say that he's probably the weakest on your list. You know, for me, just due to the fact that he's still got a long way to go, I'm going to go number 10. I'm going to go Christian Bale right now. Okay? Because he's in there, but he's young. There's no I, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to go Christian Bale for me on number 10.
Okay.
Who's your number 9?
My number 9. I think I'm going to have that as Peter O'Toole. Actually,
Surprised you kept those two, but
I know you are. I know you are.
Okay, yeah, Peter O'Toole. All right, you know, number 9 for me. I'm gonna have to give these to the young guys, but I'm gonna say number 9 is Gary Oldman for me.
Gary Oldman.
Yep.
Okay.
And I say that because as great of a character actor as Gary Oldman is, he does get a tiny strike for me never playing in really any type of leading romantic role or anything like that.
Okay.
He's just not your standard leading man, you know. And maybe he was never given the chance. I don't know, but I've never seen him in a memorable one. So.
Well, if he wants to, he can give us a call at LeadFeather Productions, and we'll be happy to make a movie
I would
with,
write a script
with Gary Oldman.
I'll start it with you. I don't care what it's about.
For my number 9, I think
Your
I'm
number
going.
8.
Thank you. My number 8, I'm going to go with Dustin Hoffman on that one.
What?
Yeah.
Dustin Hoffman?
Yep.
Get
Yep.
out of here.
Yep.
Why?
You know, I love Dustin Hoffman, but I think he's.
Are you doing that to get me riled up? Is that all?
No. I'm doing this to be very honest with you.
Why? Why, Gary? Why? Is it because he's a method actor? It's because he's a method actor, isn't it?
No, it's called acting, my dear boy. I'm just putting him where he deserves. What can I
No,
tell
it's
you?
not where he deserves.
Yeah.
The guy's a multi-Oscar winner, and that doesn't even matter. All right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That's right. Okay, who's your number 8?
All right. You know, my number 8.
Are these lists just going to be to fuck with each other?
It might be. You know, for not my number 8.
My number 1 is Paul Muni.
My number 1's John Goodman.
Take that back.
Never. You can't make me. Oh man. That's too much fun. You know, number 8 for me is probably gonna have to go with probably Sean Penn. At
Sean
this point.
Penn?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do love Sean Penn. I do love Sean Penn.
Yeah,
But you know, versatile actor, but you know, he hasn't done enough. You know, his what he offers, what he offers so far, it's just a smaller sample size, and unfortunately, that's why. What about you? That's 7 for you.
Yeah, my number 7 is going to be Mr. Marlon Brando. Putting him
Okay.
at number 7.
Oh, all right.
Moving him down 1 space from where I got him.
Okay. You know, number 7 for me.
Number 6, yeah.
God, it's hard. You know, I just Joaquin Phoenix for me is this high because of potential and the fact that he's done so much high caliber work to begin with. But I'm not going to disrespect any of the greats. I'll put Joaquin Phoenix at 7. You
Okay.
know? And a lot of these are interchangeable for me. You know, this is just how I'm feeling right now. I see more roles like he's come out with in the last 10 years to come from him in the next 2 decades. So I'm excited to see it. How about you, number 6?
Number 6 for me is going to be Joaquin Phoenix.
Okay.
I think, I think he's got a great potential, and I think there's going to be a lot more to be realized in the rest of his career.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how about for you?
You know, for me on this one is a little bit harder, but I'm gonna have to take at number 6. I don't want to. I feel bad, but I'm just gonna have to stick where it is with Marlon Brando.
Okay, Marlon Brando, number 6 for
love
Johnny.
Marlon Brando. You know, Streetcar Named Desire was one of my favorite films when I was in high school, and just not a huge nostalgia factor. But anyways, how about your number 5?
My number 5 is going to be Mr. Jack Nicholson.
Okay.
There you go. He's just so fun to watch in everything he does.
He's fun to watch in everything he does. He is. But you know what? My thing with Jack Nicholson is that a lot of times the crazy characters he plays, as fantastic as they are and as nutty as he can be, they are the same a lot. So I'm going to do the exact same thing you are.
Okay.
I was literally thinking the exact same thing. I'm going to
Copycat. There you go.
Shut the hell up.
All right, Jack Nicholson, number 5 for Johnny. Okay, my number 4. So this is where it starts to get very hard, very challenging, boys and girls.
I can't believe you... Gary still has... Just to let people know, Gary's still got Gary Oldman on his list. I'm a little surprised.
Yeah. I'm surprised I don't have John Goodman on my list. Right
I'm very surprised you don't have John Goodman on
After
your
talking
list.
about him, I was like, I love John Goodman. I think my number 4 is going to be Daniel Day-Lewis, actually.
What?
Yeah.
You have to be... Gary,
He thinks I'm joking, but this is happening. This is real life.
I know you're not joking. Are you doing this to give me a heart attack? Like
No.
I'm gonna have a stroke. There's so much stress over here.
You do what you need to do. You be happy.
God, I don't like you.
What makes your number 4?
Really fucking dislike you. My number 4 is Laurence Olivier. That's who mine is.
Oh.
Because he's not as good as the other 3 actors. That's why.
I see how it's going.
Yeah.
Okay. All
4,
right.
Laurence Olivier.
Boom.
Okay.
There it is. Count it.
No, I mean, no, seriously. Olivier for me, it's tough. You know, I mean, the top 10 in general is tough. I mean, even my 7 through 10, you could make an argument to switch a couple people out. But really, I mean, with Olivier, you know, I did notice him in multiple roles. I did see him. I did hear him. Mm-hmm. And not that I saw him here. Like, I knew it was him. I know you say that in every role, you're just like, I had a hard time actually imagining or seeing that it was him. I saw a lot of the same character traits that he had used in Prince and the Showgirl. You kind of saw a little bit of that, you know, as I'm sure you saw a little bit of it as the bad guy in Spartacus. You know, you see things from Marathon Man that you saw from, you know, A Bridge Too Far, you know, whatever. Yeah. I just remember we studied a lot of him in high school in particular, and a lot of scenes of his, and he was great. He was great, but
Okay.
just a little, you know, I wasn't always confused that it was him.
Okay. Fair enough.
Best Shakespearean actor of all time, though. There's not really any competition on that one.
My number 3 is actually going to be Laurence Olivier.
Really?
Yes.
That surprises the hell out of me.
Yeah, I love me some Laurence Olivier. He does a great job. But I agree that sometimes, and I think this was probably due a lot to the era, he comes across as a little stiff.
He does. He
Yeah.
does. And I think that was my problem
Yeah.
with him. And I'm so funny that you're agreeing. I thought he was going to be your number 1 for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to make a prediction here, though. Our number 1s are going to be the same person.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
let's see what
you've
happens.
You've got about a
50-50 chance.
Well, it depends on who I decide my number 3 is.
That's true. Who's your number 3, Johnny?
My number 3 is good old Mr. Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. Okay.
Yeah. So your prediction is wrong.
Oh, is it now?
I mean, unless you're gonna pull an old switcheroo on me or something. Yeah, you know, Tom. It's the same thing for me. For Tom Hanks is and like you said, maybe it's the era that Olivier grew up in.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe it's just the fact that he was a stuffy British actor and he was very talented. But for Tom Hanks, he just keeps getting those memorable roles, and he's just out of all the actors on this list, he has the most diverse collection of genre of movies that he's done. I mean, it's not really much of a competition as far as that goes. Yeah. So that's me. That's my 3rd. Who's your 2nd?
This is getting real tough now. My 2nd is going to be Gary Oldman.
Man, I shocked you put Gary Oldman up there. I thought Gary Oldman would be 9 or 10 for you.
Yeah.
Maybe 8.
I really think Gary Oldman does a phenomenal job in his acting.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Number 2 for me is Dustin Hoffman. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Number 2 for me is Dustin Hoffman.
Number 1 for me is going to be Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks has just had such a wide variety over such a long career that, you know, I think he can play so many different parts. And I think what I really like about him is he continues to try new parts. Like he just did Mr. Rogers, you know, and, you know, I think that he's always willing to try and delve into a character like Captain Phillips or Mr. Paper Dude in the movie The Post. I don't remember what the character's name was.
Oh, yeah, the guy who's the head of the Washington Post. Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, he's always willing to try and move on.
Agreed. Yeah, he's definitely a guy that there's no reservations for him. You know, number 1 for me is going to be, you know, every millennial's pick. You know, everybody in their 20s, their 40s probably. Daniel Day-Lewis, number 1 for me. I know the guy.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
I understand he hasn't done a lot in the past, you know, as far as total movies go, but it is the quality, not the quantity, that I consider to be important. So yeah, that's my list. For me, going number 10 of all time, and still yet to be determined for a lot of these people. Probably going to hear a lot of reverb from people and
probably
a lot of comments calling us idiots or maybe agreeing with us completely. Who knows? Number 10 for me was Christian Bale. 9 was Gary Oldman. 8 was Sean Penn. 7 was Joaquin Phoenix. 6 was Marlon Brando. 5, Jack Nicholson. 4, Laurence Olivier. 3, Tom Hanks. 2, Dustin Hoffman. And number 1, Daniel Day-Lewis.
And my list was number 10, Jimmy Stewart. Number 9, Peter O'Toole. Number 8, Dustin Hoffman. Number 7, Marlon Brando. Number 6, Joaquin Phoenix. Number 5, Jack Nicholson. Number 4, Daniel Day-Lewis. Number 3, Laurence Olivier. Number 2, Gary Oldman. And number 1 pick was Tom Hanks. I will say, let's see, where are we at on this? We're 2 hours in. This was really hard to do.
This was incredibly hard to do, and I still don't think we gave enough time.
Yeah.
I mean, we probably researched this outside of the last, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but tonight, we probably spent I spent probably 4 days researching this week, but we spent together just doing the list about 6 or 7 hours, not counting this podcast.
And I have to say I'm really not satisfied with the list. It's I feel like this could change depending on...
It could change depending on
many factors.
What new movies come out, what new actors arise.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you asked us this same question in the next year or two, it might change a little bit. My top 3, honestly, is about where it's always been.
Okay.
Honestly, my top 5, almost even.
Yeah.
Olivier was in my top 10, but lower. And then when we were talking about him and I was like looking over a lot of the movies that I'd seen of his, I was like, man, fuck, he's a lot better than I fucking remember, because Brando was in his spot in 4 earlier for me.
Okay.
And then, anyways.
For me, it's been very interesting because looking at a body of work of art and having to really quantify it like this has been very, very challenging. So if you have a job that's anything like this, I commend you for doing it, because it was rough, I think.
It is. But hey, guys, we are all out of time. We will be back next episode with a new topic. We'll maybe be continuing our decade-long film topics on the 1970s, or we may be talking about the best actresses of all time.
Or maybe some new topic. If you'd like a new topic, post it down in the comments, and don't forget to smash that like button. Like. Bloop, 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 bloop.
All right, for everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. Once again, I'm Johnny Blackburn.
And I'm Gary Elmore.
You stay classy.
And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
Is looking at you.
Black.